Hey, West Coast Green. I'm Adam Werbach. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer for Saatchi and Saatchi, which is a global advertising agency, which basically means that I work inside and outside the agency to figure out how to be more sustainable and how the companies they work with, from Toyota to Vestas, the largest wind company in the world, can do their job better. But for me, it's basically part of a lifelong effort to try to stop the destruction of this planet that has I don't know, fewer and fewer days left, as it sort of feels like right now. Uh,
And then what currently lights you up? What gets you excited?
well, if you're not excited or challenged by the moment right now, then you're basically not paying attention, or you might be asleep or in some sort of inebriated slumber. These are the most challenging days that humanity has ever faced, at least consciously. So what does that mean? This summer we saw Pakistan get to a temperature of 128 degrees Fahrenheit. 128 degrees, it's almost inconceivable. And at the same time, we saw just right after flooding that put almost 1/5 of the country underwater. We are seeing climate changes that have been promised actually come to be, and it's all happened in our lifetimes. I mean, it was about 10 years ago that I remember saying that if we didn't change within 10 years, our days might be numbered. And I don't want to sound like a millenarian or an end of days philosopher, but we have a very short chance right now to do something about it. And that's why gatherings like West Coast Green are so important. My work, I'm trying to figure out how we can get the largest corporations on the planet to become not just enablers, not just uh, not negative, but actually people who can actively promote the type of world that we need. And not just because it's kind of de rigueur or fashionable or something that they might care about for the moment, but because it's good for their business too. And what we're seeing is the largest companies on the planet have an extraordinary power to do something, but they frankly need help and they need to be guided, and they have lots of challenges in the process. So what I'm doing is trying to work with some of those companies and help them whatever way I can to help lead the world on this journey to figure out whether human culture can come to grips with the limited resources we find ourselves with on this very finite planet.
Now, I think everybody knows about your work with Walmart, uh, but in some of those cases, you had to invent new systems and new frameworks because, frankly, nobody's ever done anything like this before. Tell us about, I guess, tell us about some of those innovations that you had to invent, or some of the things that you had to create, um, and 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 what the potential impact is of if some of your work and what it could roll out to mean on the bigger picture.
Well, I'm basically an organizer, and good organizers steal from other good organizers. When I was, I don't know, something like 8 years old, I started circulating a petition to oust James Watt, who was the Secretary of the Interior under Ronald Reagan. And the petition was certainly not something that I invented. In fact, it goes all the way back in American history to the forming of the Constitution. But tactics like that have been core to figuring out how to get the public behind change. So I look to Cesar Chavez, the great union organizer of the United Farm Workers, who said the only way to build a movement is to talk to one person, have them talk to another person, have them talk to another person. I look to my mentor, David Brower, who was the first executive director of the Sierra Club, who used words and pictures and film to try to enable the heart as well as the mind about protecting some of the last places that were still wild on the planet. And I've tried to use those same type of tactics when working with large companies. So, for example, one of the projects we do is called the Personal Sustainability Project, or a PSP, or another version is called the DOT Project. In other words, do one thing. And what we invite people to do is ask about one thing that they can do that's good for themselves, good for their community, and good for the planet. And what's one thing they can do and start right away? Now, some people say that individual action doesn't make a difference, but I'll say to you that it's not that it doesn't make a difference. In fact, it's the only thing that's ever made a difference. And until we can get people to first engage and believe there's no chance we can get them to vote for a climate change cap and trade bill or anything else that smart policy people have thought of. The first step is making people believe they have agency, that they can do something about it, and that if they start taking steps in their own lives, it will have direct effect. Now, it turns out that if they do that, there's lots of other benefits that the organizations that the people work for, their communities benefit. For a company, for example, if your employees are volunteering, if they're actually taking actions to save energy, if they're doing things that are good for their health, like walking or exercising at work, the chances are they're going to be more productive because they'll be happier where they are. They'll actually figure out a bunch of things in their own lives, which makes them happier employees. They'll save you in healthcare costs. And frankly, they'll go and save a lot of good resources that need to be protected for the environment. So that's all good things that are good for the business as well as good for the planet. And I guess the innovations I've tried to work on and I've tried to capture in the book I wrote called Strategy for Sustainability is that all of these innovations are things that just make good sense, and they actually tend to make good business sense. And kind of I think the very radical concept is, someone like me who really comes from a grassroots organizing background has a lot to offer in the business sense, because businesses and managers need to organize their employees since they're so large in the same way we need to organize communities. And that's kind of why right now I'm trying to encourage lots more people to get into this space. There are some folks who've been in a lot longer than myself, but we need a lot more people trying to push the corporate world forward because they need help, and there are lots of people with skills and passion who are looking to help.
What do you see is going to happen? How is this going to unfold? What do the next few years hold for us? We all seem to be in agreement that we've reached the point where we can see our own potential end, and we've run out of time in a certain regard. What's going to happen? I mean, is it going to be a big push at the end? You're one of the most optimistic people I know. Tell me what you see happening in the next few years.
So I guess the big question is what's going to happen in the next few years. Are we going to figure it out? I mean, I think the first thing we need is some better ideas, and I don't mean to be too self-reflective in the sense, but as a professional environmentalist, most of my life, I feel like I was kind of pushing a boulder uphill, and sometimes didn't even know why I was pushing that particular boulder up that particular hill. And it didn't mean that I or any of my colleagues weren't smart, well-focused, well-intentioned people, but truth is that no one has a playbook for how you deal with rewiring the entire economy for a low-carbon future. The models we have are revolutions, are large cultural changes. When the great climatologist Stephen Schneider died too suddenly and too early, just a couple months ago, we were all shocked. And I recalled when he said to me that Stephen had first testified in front of Congress in 1981 about climate change. And in 30 years, we've done very little about it. I said, how do you stay positive? He said, well, I once asked that same question to Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, and she said, Stephen, cultural change takes a generation. And I guess that's right. I mean, 30 years is a pretty long generation. But we are changing the culture. We're changing the culture to understand that we live in times where our resources are finite, where our hope and our hearts are large, where this massive, wonderful humanity is so innovative and so beautiful that we have to be able to figure it out. But instead of going dark, which is very easy for me, because I can look at the floods and I can look at the hurricanes and I can look at the pestilence and I can say, this is climate change and here it comes. Or I can say, look at all these beautiful people being born all across the world and imagine what they can invent. Imagine what they can do. And can't they do better than we've done in our lives so far? And I just have to believe that they, and with a little bit of our help, are going to figure it out.
What are you excited to see this year at West Coast Green?
The thing I loved about West Coast Green last year was just the great people and the radical ideas that were there. So whether it was an invention on the floor that someone seemed to have just made in their garage and finally got in a booth together to share, and the raw passion they had for their invention, to the kind of the larger systemic models that people are talking about. I always make sure to take a chance just to kind of clear my head a little bit and walk around with fresh eyes and say, wow, what? Let me not get blasé about the fact that people are bringing their wares to a global marketplace here, and there are offerings really. There are offerings for a hopeful future. And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, there's no farmer's market that you can come to where people are offering you solutions for the world. But this is that sort of farmer's market, and I want to be among those farmers.
And tell us what you're going to be talking about at the conference.
Well, I'm doing a session with Amy from eBay, and eBay is one of the companies I'm actually most impressed with from a sustainability standpoint. And sure, they've got good, green plans and green servers and things like that. But what I really like about it is that it's all about recycling. It's about taking stuff that people no longer want and putting into hands of people who do want. And those sometimes might be collector's spoons or C3PO dolls. But it also means the trade of goods that have already been used once. So we're going to talk about actually how you move past the idea of kind of a weak green messaging where you kind of slap a green leaf on something and hope that you get this windfall of consumers, and instead go deep into business models and how do you actually use consumers to create a halo around your own business that's well-deserved and will actually move people forward. And the important thing is that people need to bring their phones with them. We need people who have smartphones. And if you don't, if you're like a tablet person, I mean, literally like a tablet person where you like bang things into a rock to make them work, you can bring your tablet too. But if you have a smartphone, bring it, because we're going to do some playing with them.
And if there was a question you'd like to ask the audience while you're there that potentially they could answer, what would you like to ask them?
What would I ask the audience who's there? Wow, I want to know two questions. I mean, one, which is the David Brower question, which is, what got you? What bit you? What got you started? Because I think the story of how we all got into this journey is extraordinary. And why are we all together? Why do we all want to spend our weekends together? That's the first question. The second one I want to ask is the question of what people are hopeful about. What's the thing that that connects to why you got into this first, that makes you hopeful about the future? I'm excited to learn that.
Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you at West Coast Green.
See you soon. Bye.